So we won't be more than an hour, but I'm aiming for about 45 minutes of a quick kind of catch up where we are. This is the original panel from last time, but not all of you were here. So before we start, I think we'll go from my left to my right, a brief introduction of who you are and your position, for want of a better word.
Hello. Hello. Hi, so I'm Rasheen, I'm from the Liberal Democrats in Kingston, and I was part of the Vote Remain campaign.
Hi, I'm Max. I was the director of Kingston Conservatives Stronger In, and I was from the Stronger In side.
Hi, my name is Patrick Wild. I headed up the Vote Leave campaign locally in Kingston, and I'm also a member of UKIP.
Oliver Turnbull, I'm a local businessman, and I eventually voted out.
Okay, so that's who we have. I've got a few questions submitted, but for this to work best, I think it's good to take questions from the floor. So if anyone has a question, let's see your hand up. If not, I'll go to one of the submitted ones. Anyone here? Okay, feel free to, as this conversation runs and runs, you might be inspired to chip in. But for now, I'm going to go with the obvious one. Well, it's obvious to me. What does Brexit mean? Okay, and let's start with Max on this one.
What does Brexit mean? Theresa May has done her best to clarify that terribly, but it seems to be the Conservative Party will be left to define what Brexit means, because the Labour Party is off in splendid isolation of the opposition currently. So we're looking at a hard Brexit versus soft Brexit look as being talked a lot about in the press, and that basically comes down to the single market, which some, as David Davis, see to be a horrible influx and influence of immigrants and everything that is terrible about the EU, and some, as Dominic Grieve and Ken Clark and other Conservatives see, as brilliant and should be our new way of influencing Europe. We are going to leave the European Union. I accept that, as does basically every other reputable politician, other than those who want to fight a democratic mandate rather than change it. But Brexit is, we have no idea what form it's going to take yet. We have had a few months, and I think we'll have to take 10 years to find out what it actually means.
Okay, Patrick, what does Brexit mean?
Well, I mean, ultimately, Brexit does mean Brexit. We will be leaving the European Union. It's a dead set. We'll be leaving in 2.5 years. As Max says, in what dimension really remains to be seen. Do we maintain our position within the single market, or do we make our own routes, avert the single market, and look to go global? And there's an awful lot of uncertainty at the moment. Theresa May has not clarified in what dimension the Conservative government hopes to progress in. For all intents and purposes, the Conservative governments are notoriously split on the European Union in general. There is an awful lot of uncertainty out there. An awful lot of it comes down to negotiation with the European Union and with the Brexit cabinets. It's a very exciting time, but as I say, slight uncertainty and slight apprehension.
Okay, Rasheen?
Well, as someone that works in the city, I'm not quite sure I'd call it exciting. I think Brexit means, at the moment, it means a lot of market uncertainty. It means up to thousands and thousands of job losses, which is millions of pounds of tax receipts lost for the NHS. So where we're going to get our £350 million a week from, I'm not entirely sure at the moment. In reality, I hope it means a soft Brexit, so we maintain single market and freedom of movement. I think that's our best chance of keeping businesses and business confidence in Britain. I have a suspicion it will also mean the expansion of Heathrow Airport as a signal by Theresa May that Britain's open for business. And I genuinely think it will mean a weaker economy, and I think there'll be a lot of people that will suffer as a result of it.
And Oliver?
These kind of hard Brexit and soft Brexit terms, complete fallacy, made-up things. Before the referendum, no one had heard of these things. Now we kind of want to divert the argument to soft and hard. It sounds like an ice cream shop. We were asked a very simple question: you leave or you don't leave. It wasn't about soft Brexiting and hard Brexiting. And one of the things I think my theme today might be about is we're not just London; it's the United Kingdom. And all the press and all the banks are all moaning, of course they want access to cheap labour, they want access to the single market, but actually we've got to just think about the whole United Kingdom. And I feel sorry for Theresa May, because we want this ongoing commentary, we want this soap opera, we want every day to say what you think today, Prime Minister. We're going to a negotiation process, and when I'm going to negotiate in my business, I don't tell the other side what I'm going to do. You know, I keep my cards in my pocket, and when I'm going to play my cards, I play my cards. I'm not going to tell them, I'll whisper on social media what we're going to do, we'll settle for this deal. No, we're going to get the best deal for Britain, and actually we've got to be patient. We can't have sensationalist headlines every day on both sides. Just let's be calm, let's see how it ends, and it will end well.
Okay, and you've most of you there have mentioned the single market. So I think Remainers would say that people didn't know that they were voting to leave the single market, and people who want to leave say it was quite clearly quoted by many prominent politicians that we would be leaving the single market. So let's start with Rasheen here. Did people think that they were voting to leave the single market?
I think people were voting to stop immigration, and therefore by default they were voting to leave the single market. I think the kind of what people were voting for is actually a really, really interesting question, because, and this is I think why the negotiations and all the rest are really quite difficult, because a lot of people voted leave, not necessarily because they wanted to leave the European Union, but because this was the way that they could see to send people a message. And from whatever that message is, you know, we've got to listen and say, okay, well, you know, people were clearly feeling disenfranchised, and this was the way of saying, actually, I'm not happy with the way things are in this country. It's not a way I agree with expressing it, but that has to be respected, the fact that it's happened.
Oliver, please.
I think they did, but I think the issue got clouded. I think people thought it was a general election. Boris Johnson was not acting as a Prime Minister when he was stupid bus. UKIP weren't acting with any power of influence. They were, it's an issue. It's not a general election. We had that in 2015. We elected our Prime Minister. We elected our political parties in 2015. And I think people got very confused what was an election and what was a referendum. And I think that was made clear. And I think both sides, people Leave told loads of lies. Remain told equally as many lies, if not more. And actually George Osborne spelled a complete, web of lies. So did Boris. So did Nigel Farage. And I think people got very, very confused by what's actually going on. And I think that's just our politics today at the moment. People are trying to write in 140 characters rather than actually taking the time to explain things properly. And they're all getting too washed away with social media rather than proper debate and proper discussion.
Patrick? So
people were familiar with the uncertainty with regards to the single market. I think in Remain's defence, it set the benchmark of their campaign. We leave the European Union, we're out of the single market. Obviously that remains to be seen, because we're being presented now with this counterproductive debate in the House of Commons by the likes of Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg, who for all intents and purposes were firmly rejected at the last general election. However, I do feel immigration was the underlying issue throughout this whole campaign, rightly or wrongly. People, particularly in the north of England and in Wales and in the Midlands, who have seen the pressures on public services, not solely at the hands of immigration, but it plays a part of it. They went out and voted to leave. That was their main concern throughout this referendum debate, and the single market was overthrown for those reasons. As I say, we do find ourselves in the position where we're still debating the single market. There's still a lot of uncertainty and apprehension to that respect. So immigration was the underlying issue throughout this debate.
And Max?
We voted to leave for more than one reason. It is so far too simplistic to say we voted to leave because of immigration, a reason cited by Bob Worcester of Morey. The first that's come out since Brexit, asking people, why did you vote for Brexit? It was not immigration, it was not any single issue, it wasn't the fact for Polish people taking our jobs. There's nothing that we can say is one reason why. The only thing that united something like 98% of people who voted for leave was a discontent with the establishment, with the way things are going, been happening with the idea that it was a vote against David Cameron. People saw through David Cameron and his belief that referendums could be used for him rather than for the people to sort out what they really wanted. And that's sort of my idea about that. I don't really see the single market as something which people voted against. People have voted against the EU in its current form. There is no political mandate for Theresa May. There is no political mandate for a hard Brexit which stigmatises migrants and causes a 47% rise in hate crimes on our streets, which happened in the immediate after Brexit. So I don't see there's any democratic mandate for hard Brexit and leaving the single market at all. We need to keep debating this.
Okay, this brings us into something that Lorna has asked on Twitter. Should there, you say Max, about a mandate, should there be a general election before Article 50 is triggered? I'm going to start with Max, as you were on that subject.
Well, if I was Theresa May, I would absolutely trigger a general election right now. I know that I have no personal mandate. David Cameron was elected on something, and I'm implementing policies which weren't in the Conservative Party manifesto. And if I was wise, I would see that my majority in the House of Commons is very slim, and if I'm going to get a deal through in 2 years' time before the general election, before a 2020 general election, I'm going to have to get every single member of my party, which are more split than ever, to agree on a deal. And currently with the Labour Party polling at under 20% in some polls, if she was very canny, she could win 400 seats and get a good soft Brexit deal and ignore the loonies in her party who want to single out migrants and have dental checks on refugees fleeing from the terrible conflict.
So that was Jack Straw. That was the Labour. That was Jack Straw. That was nothing to do with the Conservative Party. That was Jack Straw.
Well, I'm afraid he isn't the only.
Well, no, so he's the guy who came public and said that. That's not the Conservative Party.
No,
refused that.
there is actually.
The government refused to do that.
It was his incentive to...
It was not. The government is very different from the Conservative Party. The Conservative MPs stood up in the House of Commons. I know that Jack Straw is Labour.
Okay. He called for that publicly.
Yeah. He is one of the people calling for public. Don't try and butt in on this. This is a a Conservative Party MP stood up in the House of Commons and said it today in a debate over refugees. We should do what Jack Straw said, is implement dental checks. I'm not defending Jack Straw. I'm simply saying that this is something talked about in the Conservative Party.
Patrick, can you come in on that?
Absolutely no. I don't think there is a mandate for a general election pre-2020 for reasons that Max has already touched on. One, I will say, referendum, regardless of whether you accepted the result or whether you were happy with the result, that's regardless. That's the beauty of referenda. It's not a general election. You know, party politics aside, it's a completely different mandate. By which I would say... What I will say is, a general election pre-2020 would be political suicide for any party other than the Conservatives, and it pains me to say, quite potentially, the Liberal Democrats, as for reasons that have been mentioned. Labour are in a total state, UKIP are no better, I'll be the first to admit that. The Greens, I don't really know what their mandate is at the moment. Thank you, but I have admitted this and I'll state it at my own accord. I mean, the Liberal Democrats, to credit where it's due, there's seemingly an awful lot of harmony at this moment in time, post-referendum. I think they've benefited, despite the results, on a political party side of things. And the Conservatives are dominating because, you know, they'll play out the fear factor, they'll play out the uncertainty, they'll say, well, you know, Brexit means Brexit, we're giving you this Brexit deal, you know, we're the only party that can take this thing forward. It would be wrong to implement a general election.
Rasheen, seeing as the Liberal Democrats have been mentioned there?
I mean, I think it probably would actually do the Liberal Democrats quite a bit of good. We'd probably gain 4 or 5 seats. To be honest, probably not more than that if there was one. If I was Theresa May, I would genuinely be quite split actually, because there's the lure of the fact that she could absolutely decimate Labour in the north of England. However, one thing, and again going back to the kind of UK stock market, the market's like certainty, and they've already undergone a massive period of turmoil as a result of not necessarily the referendum, but the fact that no one knows what the outcome of the referendum is going to look like. And I think if we're looking at our place as a global economy, I think that would actually be even further weakened by a general election. I don't agree with you. I think Theresa May does have a mandate. You don't vote for the president of this country, you vote for the party. I know, and that's not how a lot of people perceive it, but it's the fact is that's what happens, and therefore the Conservatives do have a mandate. And a part of giving that mandate means people do implement things that weren't in a manifesto. It might gall you what they're doing, but they do have a mandate with which to do it. But no, I don't think she should, but I think she might, is the answer.
And Oliver.
I think she definitely has a mandate, and thank God it's her, not Boris. To be honest, if Boris was in power now, I think he would have a general election, because the polls and any kind of psychopathic consultant next to him would say call election, because look at the majority, you could go and get 60 or 70. I think Theresa May with a majority of 10, whatever she's got, that will make her work harder to make sure that she can get her MPs on side, which will make sure you have to negotiate, and she'll have to make sure the Conservatives are on side and actually get cross-party support where necessary. But this wasn't the Conservative Party manifesto. It was the promise of a referendum. It was delivered. Parliament voted on that referendum act. They passed it, I think 380 to 200 and something. It was delivered, and after that, it was an endemic thing. I've got a lot of civil servant friends. There was not one day of planning done by the civil servants of actually leaving. That's where we are right now. That everyone's panicking in Whitehall, like, what do we do? What do we do? You've got no idea. How do we start breaking free? There was no war game exercising. If you look how the military prepare for anything, there's options, there's modelling. We go through these situations. The civil servants just sat there and go, oh, well, it's happened now. What do we do next? That was my point.
No, that's
I read that was Mr. Cameron's direct orders.
It could well be. It wouldn't surprise me if it was.
No, it was. I have a friend who works in the Treasury, and when I said to him, so what was Plan B? He said Plan B was that everyone would vote the right way.
Okay, the next question leads on from that, but I'd like to take some questions from the floor, so have a good think, and let's try and do that. Oh, we've got a hand up already. Yeah, go for it.
It was. So my name's David Randall. I run a small business called Maple Works, which is a flexible workspace, and this is probably the sixth business I run. So I'm in the SME sector, and it's in the last 4 months since the 23rd of June, and nothing good has happened to improve the business environment for my business. Costs are going up, consumer confidence is going down, and my customers are worse off. Some of them dramatically worse off. They've lost contracts or they've had to relocate, this kind of thing. So it was a question specifically for you, sort of Oliver, as a representative of business here. I mean, what sort of business are you in that you think leaving the European Union is going to benefit?
Well, I suppose in the immediate aftermath, I said, and last time we were here, that the day after not much would actually change for us. If I look at what has happened since, for my business, as a person, as a micro, I'm a small, medium-sized business, I work in technology, I own technology businesses. We won our first major project out of New York against Salesforce in America. It's the first time we've ever been compete with American companies, because the pound is actually at a level now we can compete at. The pound was always overvalued for the banks. We can now go into America and win business and bring jobs in. We've employed 3 people since Brexit. Now that's not an ideology, because I want to push it through saying I was right, because looking up and recruiting people. Inflation, the economy now, look, the Nissan guy, he went to see Theresa May. Again, I'm going big business here, but he came out and said, I feel confident. Before, he was in the press saying, we're going to pull out of Britain, we're going to put that plant in France. Where suddenly now, he left that meeting saying, I feel confident what Theresa May's told me. Now, he probably has the best idea what Brexit's going to look like, because around that table, when she's saying, don't worry about this, put another car plant in Sunderland. But from a small business point of view, inflation's going up, that's going to challenge all of us. It's going to be a massive challenge next year. It's going to be the ticking time bomb for Theresa May. That if that goes to 3%, 4%, she's going to have to bring back index-linked stuff for all of our business rates and stuff like this, and benefits, etc. But it's a difficult one, and I've spoken to business people where they're having a great time. I've spoken to business people that they're struggling, and I think until we actually see the actual long-term bit coming out of this, it's going to be a struggle for all of us, and uncertainty.
Do you want to come back on that? How does that answer your question?
I guess my only comeback is that for people like Nissan, they might well be making the best of a bad lot, but it's not something that they would have preferred. And I think most of people that I know in business, I can't think of anybody who's come out in favour of leaving the European Union as something that's going to improve.
But the JCB guy, the chairman of JCB, has actually withdrawn from the CIB and said we're cancelling our membership because their attitude towards Brexit, saying we could have the best record year in our history next year. Britain can export globally with a low pound now. We can actually manufacture things in the country now, just export them and actually get value. And people are buying British goods. You look at the German car industry; they're going to have a nightmare next year. If Brexit happens.
they will also pull our contracts. And if they pull our contracts, then we don't have jobs. And there's going to be nobody. And I agree with the SME, but actually professional services in the City of London employs a lot of people, and that is the bit that's going to suffer. And it's the, you know, it's the part that, to be honest, quite a lot of people think, oh, well, you know, you're all okay, you're liberal professionals, etc. But you know, I'm terrified about my job. If I'm being honest, I'm absolutely petrified. I'm spending less money.
Because of a massive shock to the political and social psyche of the country. But we see that already with the fact that we've let in 12 child refugees, and on the front page of The Sun there was a picture of a refugee smiling with the caption, "Does this look like a child?" You know, these are people fleeing from a country beset by war, which we, out of the graciousness of our good hearts, have said we'll allow 12 in, and then it's this xenophobia, it's this rampant xenophobia, which the UKIP voters managed to pick up, which the Labour Party is struggling with in the Midlands, and we need to confront that. Then the voices of 48% of the entire country who said, actually we don't believe in these xenophobic lies told to us that immigrants are coming here and they're being terrible.
Patrick, xenophobic lies.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something there. 52% of people even going out and voting to leave the European Union is not an indicative that they are outright xenophobic. I'm sorry to say, you're shaking your head. There is a vast difference between someone who is sceptical of mass immigration and somebody who is a far-righter, you know, BNP, outright xenophobe. Okay, that's fine. You know, there is hate crime in the UK and across Europe. I mean, we've seen this surge in far right parties in Austria, in Hungary. You know, those things don't just sprout overnight. It's a growing epidemic in Europe. UK-wise, yes, there have been problems, and it has been highly documented, but problems in that respect, and I'm not going to start making excuses. You know, they've always been there, and unfortunately they always will be there. They've been documented, and unfortunately they've been fabricated post-Brexit. It's not so much a spin by the establishment, but it's been objectified, and it's been subjectified to a great degree, and I feel like the 52%, it's a cliche, the 52% who voted to leave have been intentionally victimised by the establishment, by members of the Conservatives and Labour to say, no, you are wrong, we're going to prove why you're wrong, you are xenophobic. I think that's the basic line of it.
Just to defend myself fair, at no point did I say 52% of my population, which I live alongside and are going to work with.
You said the 48%.
Can I say what I can say? I said that, and I blamed Vote Leave, and I blamed your interim leader, Nigel Farage, for xenophobic lies, which the National Office of Statistics will back me up on. But on your sort of, I'm not sure how the relevance of, oh, there's always been hate crime. Hate crime is rising all the time. Oh, well, it was fabricated. You know, that's very easy for you as a white man living in London to say. For Pakistanis living in Birmingham, for black people living in Tower
just
Hamlets,
bearing in mind, as I said, it transcends the UK and it goes into Europe. We've seen this surge in far-right parties. It's a bigger problem there than it is here, unfortunately.
So does that make it right?
No, of course it doesn't. I have not justified it. I have not justified it. I have said an awful lot of it is fabricated by people, by the media, to say you've made the wrong choice. That's my personal understanding.
Okay, let's break you two up for a minute. Oliver.
I think when you look at some of how our political parties are acting and how the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is rife, the fact that that conference, the head of propaganda, Julie Walker, has to be expelled by the party for another anti-Semitic comment in a meeting, how they're acting, how UKIP are punching each other and knocking each other out. We're not exactly setting the right tone at the moment for our public to follow. And when you see something at the top happening, for me it's really distasteful. But you know, Britain does have issues with it, and I think, you know, the law has to be used to stop it. But when I'm seeing French Muslim ladies dragged off beaches in France for covering themselves up, respecting their faith, when I see mosques getting closed in Rome last night because they don't want people going in there getting radicalised, and you've got 3,000 Muslims protesting, and I think actually we have to sort of, not saying they're right, but I tell you what, the freedom and liberty of our country and respect to this country, they're damn sight better than what I'm seeing in Europe at the moment. About some, you know, if I ever saw a woman dragged off a beach in Britain for covering herself up, you know, we're not at that stage, and thank God we're not.
Rasheen, getting back to the question, has the EU referendum allowed an environment of racism to flourish?
I wouldn't necessarily be quite as strong as that, but I do think that there is a small majority that have used it to legitimise their views. That's not to say that everyone has by any stretch of the imagination, but there will be some people who do think that actually it's now okay to say things. I think that there's also, however, probably the left-wing pro-Remain media are probably looking for more instances of it as well. So I do think that even though I don't deny it's on the increase,
but I said it here. Yes, I did.
You did say, yeah.
And no, I think the poster was completely unethical. A week before the referendum, at the unfortunate time when Joe Cox was murdered as well, for reasons already established, people are sceptical of mass immigration. That's no excuse. That is no excuse for the poster at all. But I think it objectifies the fact that there is a lot of apprehension with regards to immigration. Which is exactly why I'm not making excuses, because anyone who was remotely apprehensive about mass immigration was already going to, well, I'd imagine, was instinctively going to vote to leave regardless. So I agree the poster was completely unnecessary.
But, sorry, it's not just one poster though. There's been a rhetoric from UKIP over the last few general elections, the last few European elections, which has been consistently looking for these fears of people in society and trying to whip them up. So, I mean, it's not every UKIP member, I agree with that, but the way in which your national party has fought campaigns has deliberately looked to find people's fear of the other, whip it up and exploit it in order to gain votes. And it's no wonder that when then the Leave campaign succeeds and people who have been whipped up over the past 10, 12, 15 years by Farage et al. Suddenly think, actually, I've been legitimised and I'm not in the minority thinking this, because 52% of the country have voted with me on Leave, so they must think the same as me, even though a lot of them don't. And I really do think that, I very strongly believe that UKIP and the party machine have to take some responsibility for what's happening at the moment, because they have whipped it up.
Let's come to Oliver, not a member of UKIP, but a Leave voter.
It's interesting because if you said British jobs for British people, is that a racist comment? Do you think? That's not, because it's interesting. If you go back to the Labour conference in 2009, Gordon Brown stood up when we were in the midst of the banking crisis. He said the theme of the conference was British jobs for British people. Okay, so Gordon Brown is a centre left, a bit more left than Blair, but it's like UKIP for me. Thank God that we're over now. The party's in a mess. And this. I'm not saying they're evil, but they twisted things. Their rhetoric was appalling. I'm glad they broke off from the right of the Conservative Party, because they didn't belong in there. And I'm very happy with that. And then hopefully now you can see the true UKIP coming through. Nigel Farage managed to somehow, I don't know how, steer them into what they've done, but actually the people underneath them are absolute rabble. They're a complete shit show, sorry my language. But they are, not being funny. When I see that person laid out in the European Parliament getting knocked out by having a meeting, like we might have, there might be issues in the Conservative Party, but disagreements, and we might, but we're not knocking people out. And if that's how political parties are going to act, they've got no place in the society.
Patrick, your members.
Absolutely. Can I just say, going on with what Oliver says, I completely agree on the majority of that. And UKIP have come up with some strange comments over the years. They absolutely have. And the drama from Strasbourg the other week was just unforgivable on a mass level. What I think what UKIP have capitalised on in context over the past few general elections, over the past few years, is the fact that they have seen a greater increase in support, rightly or wrongly, and a lot of their rhetoric can be perceived as xenophobic, and I will be the first to admit that. Yes, no, you're absolutely right, it is. But UKIP, for a long time, have been the only party that have been striving for controls of immigration, not to stop it completely, because we do welcome, the vast majority of UKIP members do welcome doctors, nurses, anyone of any profession who wants to come and learn and embrace the British culture from all over the world, not just Europe, but from Pakistan, from India, from the wider scale. So I completely understand where you're coming from, but I'm just making my defence with regards to my party. What I will say is, sorry, just one more thing. Going by party rhetoric, I mean, Oliver already mentioned with regards to Gordon Brown stepping up on the Labour conference stage in 2009 and saying British jobs for British workers. We've actually seen the exact same rhetoric come out of the last Tory 2016 conference, by where Amber Rudd, the new Home Secretary, publicly got up on stage and said, well, we're going to administrate and we're going to publish all the data of every foreign worker in this country. And yet, rightly or wrongly, 2 weeks later, she's backtracking on that promise now. Rightly. And she's... Sorry?
Rightly.
Yeah, I agree, rightly. I do.
Just on that point, though, I'm not condoning, the left-wing leaning press start calling her Nazi, and have you read Mein Kampf the night before? And if anyone believes, no, it's in the it's in the Guardian. Everyone's relating to has she and it's like it's so stupid. She hasn't read Mein Kampf. She's not a Nazi. You know what? She has made a very ill-judged comment, which has actually come out of her not having the right people around to explain things. Comes out of this Twitter generation where we don't explain points properly. But actually, if we actually come down to the crux of it, is that the Conservatives have issues here, but actually, you know what? UKIP just I can't stand them. Sorry. The business they scared me.
What I will say is, UKIP, they are in a mess at the moment, so I'm not going to start defending it.
Max, you itching there?
There is not enough time of the day for the amount of attacks I could level at UKIP. They are a disgusting party, basically.
They're not disgusting, they're just disorganised.
Sorry, you've talked a lot, you've done a very good defence, one of the best I've heard in many years for a party which feeds off the far-right xenophobia.
It is not far-right.
Yes,
It is not far-right. In comparison to the parties of Austria and Hungary, they are actually quite centralised. That I will say.
But you do ally with them in the European Parliament. But I won't attack UKIP anymore. I won't attack UKIP.
Direct democracy.
The Conservative Party has a lot to answer for with their sort of drift to the right. One of the reasons why UKIP is in a bit of trouble currently is because the Conservative Party are fulfilling what UKIP promised. Conservative Party are delivering for all those people who supported UKIP a anti-immigration rhetoric now, and I see there's a lot of problems in politics currently with the anti-Semitism of Labour, with the xenophobia in UKIP obviously, and in the Conservative Party more recently. If you want a real party free of xenophobia, please visit the Lib Dem page, but they aren't in any position of power anytime soon, so it's a difficult time for those who see people as humans, not as their flags.
Sorry, on the Amber Rudd comment again, I'm an employer. I'm a tier 2 sponsored company. My company is published by the UK government, so that I can accept people on sponsored visas. Okay, that's free information. It's available today. Gordon Brown bought it in 2009 when we cleaned up the visa mess. We went from 80 visas down to 5. So
scrap the 10p tags.
Well, yeah, different issue. But actually, my company's published today that I'm allowed to employ people on sponsored visas. Okay, it's on the website. You can go and see it. You can see it today. Okay, so what Amber Rudd's actually saying, we've pretty much got it already. We have a public list of companies allowed to have tier 2 sponsored employees. So,
So we didn't need to leave the EU.
These aren't EU workers.
Business does transcend the European Union.
Right, let's draw a line under that one, I think. Any more questions from the floor? James?
Second referendum, is it necessary? If so, is it wise?
Second referendum, is that why it's starting with Rasheen?
However much I hate the result that we had, I actually think that a second referendum would make our problems quite a lot worse. I think it's really disrespectful to all the people that voted leave, and I would hope that if Remain had been the answer, that people that voted leave would come to the same conclusion. The only, and I will say the only circumstance in which I could see that it could be feasible would be if the European Union, in 2.5 years' time, once we've negotiated our exit package, if they said to us, do you want to have a final referendum which says it's this exit package or it's Remain, I could support that, but realistically, however much I hate the outcome, people have spoken and you have to respect that, and we just have to get on with it and make the absolute best of it that we can.
Patrick, a second referendum?
To be fair, I mean, we're being threatened with the second referendum as we speak. We've already got this counterproductive referendum on the single market, which is merely nothing but pandering to say, well, you've got it wrong, the electorate have got it wrong, we're going to push for a second referendum whether you like it or not. We care about our backhanders, we care about a quick buck in the single market. Effectively, no, we certainly don't need a second referendum. It would be a great betrayal of democracy and accountability to the UK electorate. 52% of people, admittedly, the margin could have been much stronger, but 1.4 million between Leave and Remain that went out and voted. Leave got the result. Quite frankly, the only way that I could potentially see a second referendum taking place, and I mean this, if the UK government, in its current formation, just said, we are going to ignore your result because we care more about the single market, and there's too many complications, there's too much questioning with regards to concession, were we to leave. The only honest way we would be threatened with a second referendum would be if the entire European project collapsed. And I'm sorry to say, but given the state of Banquet Deutschland in Germany at this very moment, and indeed other European countries such as Italy, it's looking increasingly likely, if we were threatened with a second referendum, that would be the case. So either way, it's...
Sorry, I don't understand your point. Why would, as a country that's leaving the European Union, we have a referendum on the future of something that we voted to leave?
Well, this is what I'm saying. My biggest worry is that the result is ignored if the UK government...
The result is not going to be ignored. Like, if you listen to the Today programme, Europe want us gone now. They've said, you voted leave, get out. That is the message, and that's what Theresa May has to battle with. I cannot understand why, if Italy looks like it's going to drop out of the single market, people suddenly give the British people another referendum. That just seems complete.
No, I wouldn't anticipate Italy falling out of the single market and indeed the European Union and then being treated with a second referendum. I agree. That's not a realistic scenario. I was kind of thinking in reverse, but yeah.
Oliver, the uncertainty of a second referendum to business.
I actually think it will happen. It's not a popular point. Most people. I think the changing nature of European politics, you have a French election next year where Hollande is 14-1 to retain the Champs-Élysées. He may as well not even run. Okay, 14-1 in a two-horse race. The Republican Party with Sarkozy or Alain Juppé, whoever wins that primary. Sarkozy's already said on day one he'll go to Berlin, day two he'll come to London to make sure the UK stays in whatever deal we need to get them. You know, Merkel is clinging on in Germany. And that's for my German clients who used to love her a year ago. Now they're saying she's clinging on. The Austrian election is coming up in a few weeks' time again. You've got the Dutch president saying the EU's a nightmare for its citizens, it's a pleasure for lawyers and its bureaucrats. I think Europe's actually waking up, and I think there'll be a deal put back to Britain. I generally believe this, with a change in political landscape, where actually someone like Theresa May might say, if I can put a deal back saying we'll have the single market, we'll have this, that's the new deal, I can see it happening.
Max, a second referendum, is it likely and would you want it?
I don't want it in its current form because I believe in democracy. We have a result, I have to respect it, as does everyone else who believes in democracy. The only case I could imagine where there's sort of a mandate, an absence of a mandate, was if we had a very, very odd deal, so one that was extremely far right or basically immaterial, so we didn't really leave at all, so everything was still in place. So if it didn't really satisfy either criteria of what the majority was voting for Brexit for, then there would be obviously those on the Remain side who want another one, and those on the Leave side who are unhappy with the deal they got who'd want another one. But personally, I'd say I don't like referendums. I would rather have a general election because then at least you have the views of the minority represented. Because even though you lose the majority opinion, even if there's an opinion poll with which the majority you disagree with, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. That doesn't mean that you can have to stop making the argument. If we had to stop making the arguments, there'd never be social change. We'd never have votes for women. We'd never have, we'd never have NATO. We wouldn't have democracy. We wouldn't have any of the things which previously were so unpopular in the world. So don't ever, if you're a Remain person, say, oh, I better give up. I was definitely wrong because 52% of people disagreed with me.
Roisin, and I'm going to link this into the following question as well. So if there wasn't to be a second referendum, should there be a vote in the Houses of Parliament for it to start with Roisin?
So, the thing I was going to add is that I don't think we should stop making the case for the European project. I think the only way that we're going to get a deal that satisfies the city and keeps our economy going is if we carry on kind of beating the drum for the European project. I think there should be a vote in the House of Commons, but I think it should be on the exit package.
Oliver, a vote in the House of Commons?
Yeah, I think there should be, but I'm not sure what happened if they got rejected. Then what happens? Is it for the government? Is it a general election? And then we're into a whole new look. Once the deal's actually kind of been negotiated and thrashed out for a couple of years, and suddenly the British government say no, don't want it, or the British kind of politicians say we don't want it. The uncertainty that could come with that could be catastrophic. So You know, I think they should have a vote, but I'd be very nervous about it.
And this is why UKIP needs to remain a party to make sure that Brexit does mean Brexit. Is that how you take it?
Absolutely. What I will say is, yes, I think the House of Commons do need to intervene in the final package. I certainly think they need to avert and get past this counterproductive single market debate, which is forever bleeding on. As we say, they are elected representatives. There's no reason why they can't talk on behalf of, say, their constituencies, assuming they are talking on behalf of their constituencies, and ultimately push for what they feel is the best package. The House of Lords I'm not even going to get onto because I don't trust them. So I'm in two minds. You know, Brexit should mean Brexit, and I want it to mean Brexit, but I don't wholeheartedly trust the Conservatives, full stop, to deliver the best possible package. UKIP, for all its flaws, and there are many, they've all been established here tonight, but they are the only party universally unified in pushing for Brexit.
Unified?
Yeah, I don't know where that word came from.
It's a very dodgy word, unified, for your party.
To be fair, it hasn't been used recently, but, you know, I'm going to break the habit for a lifetime.
We've done this one. Max, did you comment on the...
No, not yet. I think there's a case for letting MPs have a say or a vote on the final deal when it comes, because currently they have no idea of what it looks like any more than you or I do, unless they're in the cabinet. But they do have a right to represent the people who voted for them. This constituency, Kingston Conservative, voted for Remain against the wishes of Patrick.
To be fair, when Kingston had already voted, I'd already got the results I wanted, so I was already beaming to myself.
But the idea of representative democracy is a very odd one. The Greeks managed to get it right first time, unlike the rest of us, because it means that even though you might not be a minority opinion, you are represented, you are not droned out by the majority, even because you could be right. And I think it's important that MPs are respected and given a say on the final deal.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Any more from the floor? Yeah, go for it.
Do you think the results of the referendum would have been different if 16 and 17-year-olds had been allowed to vote? And do you think they should have been allowed to vote?
If anyone didn't hear that, would the results of the referendum have been different if 16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote, Rasheen?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, for me, this is probably one of the greatest travesties of the referendum, is the fact that if you look at demographically what the breakdown was, obviously there are some people in the younger demographic, like yourselves, who voted for Leave, but the vast majority of people who voted Leave were in the older demographic, and I hate to say this, but a lot of them won't actually be alive to see through the impact of what they've inflicted on the country. I heard someone describe it as the last FU of the baby boomer generation.
Oliver, 16, 17-year-olds, should they have had the vote? Would it have been different?
Yeah, I think you know, if we believe as a country 16-year-olds are right to vote, they should have a vote. I think we shouldn't be scared of democracy. You know, if more people have got the education to have a vote, then let them have the vote. You know, and would the result be different? You know, what they need is spring 1.1 million 16 to 18-year-olds would need to vote, or whatever it is, 1.2 million extra votes to swing it. I don't think the result would have been different. But obviously, the vast majority of the people would have voted to Remain. But it wouldn't have actually influenced the overall result.
Max, what's the... Obviously, you would want the 16 and 17-year-olds to have a vote, but why should they? Why should they when they don't have a vote in national elections?
Well, I'm of the opinion of Thomas Paine, of John Locke, of the libertarians, of Philosophica, who say if you pay tax, if you obey the laws, and cooperative, you should be able to have a vote on what they say. So I would have the opinion of giving votes to 10-year-olds, but that's not very popular because they pay tax, they pay VAT, and they're at that age you're judged to be culpable for crimes in the Old Bailey and the Central Criminal Court. But of course you believe in 16, 17-year-olds, they have to live with it for even longer. If you trust them to get married, join the army, drive a car, why not trust them on a vote in their future? Well, I don't think maybe it would have been enough to sway it, maybe it wouldn't. I think it's the opinion of 16-year-olds is far too fickle to call definitely for Remain. But I would have loved to have a vote on it because I was actually 17 when it happened. So some people here will have had a decision on something which I didn't. So
Patrick, what's your take on 16, 17-year-olds voting in that?
I mean, it's just like anything. What I will say is, I think the result would have been much closer had 16 and 17-year-olds been able to vote, and there are certainly 16, 17-year-olds out there who are motivated and engaged with social politics. I wouldn't necessarily, if you go with patterns and if you go with previous polls, the younger generations notoriously provide the lowest turnout amongst age ranges. So yes, the majority would undoubtedly have voted to remain, but I don't think it would have been nearly enough to sway the overall vote. As for my honest opinion, I think 18's a good minimum age to have when it comes to voting. It's just like anything, rightly or wrongly. Cigarette purchasing, alcohol purchasing. I accept it's unfair if you're already paying tax, but I think it's just the way of the world. It's up for debate. It's up for negotiation, but that's my honest take on it.
Okay, I did want to get this question in. It's a weird one, but we'll go with it. To the Remainers, what is going to be the best part of leaving the EU? And to the Leavers, what's going to be the worst part of leaving the EU? Did I get that right around? I think so. Max, what is the best part of leaving the EU for someone who's a Remainer?
Oh, very easily. It gives Britain a chance to have some blue sky thinking, to have some plan B thinking. When we lost India, we had the Empire. When we lost the Empire, we had Europe. We have no plan B currently. There is no idea. As we said earlier, the establishment, if we're going to call them that, those people working to try and make Britain a powerful country of the world, we have no plan B currently. And I'd like there to be a national conversation of what do we as a country do in the 21st century to keep us at the top of the league table? Because I think that no Brexiter, no Remainer voted for Britain to lose influence in the world. It's something which can actually be a very uniting force in our country, which is very polarised currently. We need to have a think about what we do next.
And so, flipping it around for you, Patrick, what's the worst thing?
Well, I think it's important to remember back in 1975, when the UK voted to maintain its status within the common market, there was a great sense that we were working with the common good with our European partners. I think under different circumstances, if we were in a position where there was more transparency and more accountability from within the European Union, and dare I say, were we able to control our borders on a more cohesive scale, then there's no reason as to why the European project, as it were, would be destined to fail. There are people out there, obviously, who have their own reasons for wanting to stay in and for wanting to leave. I think for reasons that Max has already elaborated on, the UK, for all it's worth, is an outward-looking country. I certainly feel that way. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be collaborating with people in a number of unions, whether it's bilateral or whether it's with 28 odd countries. There's no reason for that. Unfortunately, the European project has been deteriorating in its current formation. I certainly feel we did the right thing jumping ships while we did.
But what is the worst thing about leaving the EU?
The worst thing about leaving the European Union?
That was the question.
I think it's just, well, I suppose you could say it's maintaining your presence, making it seem as if you were working for the common good, even though you've got close to no influence. That's honestly the best I can come up with, because I felt very strongly about leaving.
Very black and white.
Oliver,
well, there you have
from what I've heard over the two, you were probably the least polarised of the panel. So, what would you say is the worst thing about us leaving the EU?
I think the worst thing for me, I think we're going to have a bit of a kick in our banking industry, which is obviously so vital to the UK. It's like 8% of GDP. That's going to have a real hit. It's going to need to think. It's going to need to kind of. There's going to be some real strategic thinking and some really hard negotiation in our banking industry, how it acts outside of the European Union in terms of legislation and how it acts with customers within the banking union, etc. I kind of feel that actually my only kind of gut feel and my only worry in life is that actually by us leaving we could actually pull the project down and that would obviously affect Britain. If I look at the European Central Bank, on Friday last week they brought their 1 trillionth junk bond. That's a huge worry. Now we're so tied up in that European bank in terms of how our banks are leveraged into that. The city has lent over £1 trillion into the European banking system in terms of assets and funds. So, you know what, if we become the poor relative and say, oh, sod Britain, like Iceland did with us. Remember Iceland, when there was money, just wrote it off, saying, you can go and sing for your supper there, your debt to Britain. If that happened to Britain, we'd be in a huge hole, and that's where it's got to be so carefully negotiated and sympathetically negotiated to get the right deal for not just Britain, but for Europe as well. Because, it's not just what Britain needs, it's what Europe needs as well. And I think this debate's too much, sometimes focused on, oh, Britain needs this, Britain needs that. Europe needs us. The major economies of Europe need Britain. Okay, and that's why this deal will happen. It will happen in the right way. The German car industry, the major industry of Europe, we're the 5th biggest economy in the world. We're one of the biggest buyers of consumer goods in the world. 27% of all new cars in Europe are bought in Britain. This is a massive, massive thing. So I hope eventually Europe and Britain kind of, can rebuild those bridges. And I think with the onset of Mr. Putin, I think those bridges will be built a lot quicker than we thought in terms of defence and actually coordination and on a common good. But I just hope our industry can really recover and make sure we get the right deal for all people.
And Roisin, is there any silver lining you can see in leaving the EU?
My hope is that because of the way in which we currently trade and the fact that so much of our trade is currently with the European Union, that it will actually give us, that we will seek trade deals with countries like China, with emerging markets and emerging economies, and that will actually give us the opportunity to be a truly internationalist country again. It won't be easy, but there are a number of agreements, transatlantic trade partnership, trans-Pacific trade partnership, that are currently being negotiated with the European Union. If we can seek to replicate some of those, we can still get a really strong outlay market for our goods, and hopefully we can maintain access to some really strong skill sets as well.
Okay, last question from the floor. If not, I've got a submitted one. Anyone got a hand up? Okay.
Can I ask it's a difficult question.
Difficult question.
It's not going to be easy answer. Had there been better living standards in those parts of the UK where people generally voted leave, it would more than likely be in different referendum results. So what, if anything, does the panel see in the current government's pronouncements that might suggest there's going to be a transfer of wealth to poorer parts of the UK where people feel that they have lost out in globalisation?
I couldn't agree more. And it's a failing of our society. It's a failing of spreading wealth out of London, and it's a failing of having a London-centric approach to this economy. The economy at the moment is so focused on banking and property because the interest rates are so low. Everyone thinks, oh, interest rates are low, we're paying less mortgage payments, great. It's not a good thing. Having interest payments this low is not a good thing. Having inflation so low, not a good thing. Look at Japan for the last 20 years. Nearly negative inflation, negative interest rate. It's crazy what they're having in that country. Living standards have suffered because the wages in this country have not increased properly. They thank God, both parties have finally got to say £9 minimum wages, £10 minimum wages. But certainly this economy has to diversify away from just banking and property and get into manufacturing, get back to making things, get another Nissan plant in Sunderland. 3,000 jobs to the Sunderland economy, is a massive thing. That's a transformational for that region. Okay, and the northern powerhouse. I'm from Cornwall originally. Everyone thinks we're really rich in Cornwall, the poorest county in Britain. Yes, we've got some pretty bits on the tourist front, but in the heartlands of Cornwall, it's almost third world in terms of the wages and so. Theresa May, if she's honest to herself and she's true, and if this is her chance to really change the direction of this country and stop playing for the rich and actually start paying for the whole society. And if she does that, she could be Prime Minister for 15 years. If she doesn't, she'll be out in a few years. She'll be gone.
As someone who works in the city.
Yeah, I don't see much on the current government agenda that will actually change things, but I really hope that they will, because undoubtedly the referendum result is a result of people feeling left behind and feeling like they frankly don't have access to what the people sitting in this room, or standing in this room, have access to. However, the problem that I have with this and with the current government is actually I view a lot of this as the making of the Conservative government in the 1980s, and by closing the mines and by completely running down the UK manufacturing industry and by helping those skills go abroad in the first place, exporting cheap labour to other countries, they are now paying the price of what their own party and their own government created 20, 30 years ago. But I genuinely don't know how to make it better, because if you're Primark, for example, why are you going to employ someone on £9 an hour in the north of England to make goods when you can pay someone 50p in India? Unfortunately it's basic economics, and unless we actually find new industries in this country which can make ourselves prosper, I can't really see how we can correct it, which is really awful, actually.
Patrick, so a lot of the UKIP vote has come from harder up areas.
Absolutely, but it's not just UKIP support. This is the important thing to remember. 60% of Labour constituencies from across the country actually voted to leave the European Union, and an awful lot of that comes down to by the fact that huge old agricultural fishing industrial industries have had their livelihoods, I'm sorry to say, frittered by the EU Commission, by a lack of cap payment and by a dodgy quota system. I mean, places in the northeast of England, and indeed places in Scotland, Aberdeen, who I think had the narrowest Remain Leave margin, they've seen profits suppressed year on, year out, courtesy of directives and courtesy of unaccounted for EU policies that have shown no sign of being rectified anytime soon. So at least I agree partly with what Rasheen says. That, we do live in a Conservative government. We do need more transparency. That's a given. I'd like to think Theresa May down the line, as the Brexit package is negotiated amongst her cabinets, how much hope that offers, I'm not entirely sure at this moment. I just hope down the line that we're in a position where all money is being centralised and is being redistributed, if you like, back to these old traditional Labour heartlands where industry has been frittered, and it's not just north east of England and Scotland, it's Wales as well.
And lastly, Max.
As I said in my opening statement, people voted Brexit for a majority of reasons, one of them being disenfranchisement with the current affairs. A lot of people voted outside of party lines. There is a new divide in our country. It's not between Labour and Conservatives, it's between those who voted Remain, those who voted Leave. But there is, it's too simplistic to say if we gave all these people money, they'd vote to Remain. But there is an element of that, because these people who have been let down by failures in government to redistribute policy away from London, failure of very Westminster-centric politicians taking their constituencies for granted. And UKIP has picked up on that. They have realised that by scapegoating immigrants and faraway Brussels, they can pick up these people who think that... Can I finish my point? Before you defend UKIP again. UKIP has been very clever at this. Far right all over Europe has been very clever at this. There has been a failing of neoliberal approach to globalisation. People have been left behind, and it is far, far too simplistic to say it's the EU's fault or it's immigration's fault. It is the failings of our own government. We need to stand up and take responsibility. We've been electing bad governments. They have not done good things for a lot of our country, and they should stop saying it is the immigrants, it is Brussels which has done this to us.
Sorry to say, a lot of that comes down to deregulation and unaccountability from the unelected EU Commission. And I'm sorry to say, you cannot stand there and blame UKIP as a political party for the odd bit of propaganda, when in fact these people have to live with a drop in wages. These people have to live in a drop in living standards day in, day out. You cannot blame UKIP. You cannot blame UKIP, I should say, for sprouting propaganda. If it's something they want to hear, so be it. But it's not UKIP that is suppressing these people's livelihoods. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Yes,
let's go back to the floor. We're going to wrap up in 5 minutes, and I've got one more question I want to do, but yeah, just briefly.
It's plainly not a matter of misdirection or overregulation from the EU that has caused the UK, exceptionally, to be very poor at distributing wealth around the country. Look at Germany by comparison, which has been very, very good, and has also been consistently a member of the European Union, as a founder member of the common market. They invest in their future, they invest in research and development, and they do extremely well. So,
although Bank of Deutschland isn't looking too promising at the moment.
Easy. I've just said UKIP are very clever by simplifying very complex issues and turning it into it's all EU's fault, and he's just done it there as an example of it. Rather than saying, yes, we've had some bad governments, yes, we should have some more distributive policies, once again,
I'm going to break you two up.
terrible.
I'm going to break you two up. Rasheen, last comment on this, and then I'll do my last question.
So I think first thing is I really, really hope that the farming subsidies and etc. that have actually been coming from the European Union are match funded by the current government, because if they're not, then the situation that we're currently faced with will be even worse. But the thing which I've heard so many people on this panel say again and again, and it's really starting to gall me, is everyone keeps on saying these people that have voted for this, which quite clearly means actually all of us standing in this room don't actually have any idea why the vast majority of people went out and voted the way in which they do, because we're making quite a lot of assumptions here.
Okay, last question. Can you answer in numbers only how much of the 350 million a week will be spent on the NHS? Okay, Oliver.
0.
0. Patrick.
I think 2.5 years down the line, when we actually have left the European Union, not the full 350 million. That's a good damn given the Conservative government's agenda. I don't know, maybe a couple million, maybe I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 million.
Okay, so okay.
This isn't numbers only. You can speak in binary, but
Binary. Okay, yeah, okay. Just to clarify, this it's a wonderful thing. This whole NHS funding. It's if you follow me on Facebook, you'll probably see why I get so annoyed by it. The chief executive of the NHS asked for a 5-year plan. We said, give us a 5-year plan. How much money do you want? He said, I need that kind of money. The Conservative said, there's that money. A year later, he said he's broke. Okay, and actually, it comes down to planning again. You know, we've got to start planning things in this country much better, and forget about battle buses and Boris saying, "Look at my bus." Actually, get down to people actually appreciating a pound that all of us earn in this room, paying back our hard-earned wages to actually make it accountable. People spend our money properly, and across all government, that is. And government is just the biggest waste in society in terms of money. And I see it day in day out in Kingston. You know, if I ever see another bus lane or all these other lanes we're building or fountains we're trashing, whatever, let's just get down to the real things that matter to us, not just stupid things.
Max, in numbers only.
Sorry, John.
Numbers only. How much of 350 million?
I'm falling into Patrick trap. I want to speak rather than numbers. 0 currently, because we haven't left the European Union. We have yet to see what that happens, but it's a very different answer from the man who stood next to me a few weeks ago and said, we will get £350 million if we vote Brexit delivered to our NHS, which you did say, and you got the right reaction from the crowd. Someone said, that's bollocks. And I think people saw through that. That's what I mean by the kind of lies that are happening. But, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. I think we will realise.
We ain't got time. I'm going to click the machine.
0.
0. The absence of a number. Okay. So I think we draw a line under it there because everyone's been stood up for a long time. But let's just go back through with a closing statement where you can use words as well as numbers. Just try and keep it down to a minute of what you hope for this in the next 2 years.
Just to quickly balance that last question, George Osborne also said we're in a recession now. We're not. The IMF have actually apologised to Britain again for actually having 1.7% growth, which is the lead of the G8. So let's just just balance to that question. They both lied, and that's just the politics there, unfortunately. I just really hope that we don't get infatuated by the Brexit for the next 2.5 years. This country has a lot of other issues. I get so bored every time it's about Brexit. Talk to me about the NHS, talk to me about our education system, talk to me about infrastructure building. If we leave at Heathrow for another year and just dilly-dally around, just get on with things. So my hope is that we get a good deal, but actually we concentrate on Great Britain and actually the things that are in this country that right now need fixing, not just about some deal that we're going to go off and have fancy dinners about. Actually, let's get our country right.
Patrick, last statement.
Yeah, I think really a big call out. It goes without saying I got the result that I wanted in the end. Huge call out to the dynamic and vibrant Conservative, Labour and indeed Liberal Democrat strongholds in the South East, South West, East Anglia, Wales, East Midlands, West Midlands, North West and North East that all voted to leave the European Union. If you think into context, going on by what Oliver said, the very week before the EU referendum results, we had Jeremy Corbyn firmly outright saying, yes, we can't control immigration whilst we're in the European Union. We had trade unionists saying we will trade regardless of single market accession, and indeed we had George Osborne and we had David Cameron saying we will not be in recession because of regardless of EU membership, were we to leave. So all in all, I think we're on the right track. There is uncertainty, there is apprehension out there, but I think we're making good waves.
Max, where do you want us to go in the next couple of years? Last statement.
I want us to be far less polarised as a society. We are heading the way which America is heading, where they have two candidates and two worldviews which could not be more different. No Brexiter voted for Britain to be poor and not have any relationship with Europe and no migrants, and no one voted for Remain for mass immigration. There is something which unifies all of us, and that is that we want to have good policy. We want to have Britain as a strong place of the world table, and I want a sort of unity to be rewarded and to be produced in Britain, where we get a good deal, which doesn't mean that we're very harsh, which doesn't mean which we can't have some blue sky thinking of how we can still help the European project. I want us to be a bit more united and a bit more tolerant.
And last words.
So personally I hope for a soft Brexit, but what I really hope is that the people, whatever reason it was that people voted leave, that actually that's explored by the government, and that the government starts taking heed of why there is such mass disgruntlement and why people use this as a reason to protest against the establishment, and actually start to try and think about solving some of the reasons for that.
Okay.
One last quick thing, and I hope this whole debate fires up people in the UK to get involved with politics. Okay, we moan about our politicians the whole time, but unless you stand up and do something yourself, you can't moan. You can't say they're all crap. Okay, actually, if more young people get involved with politics and actually get empowered by this and say, actually, I want to be a councillor. John is a councillor here. Being an MP. It's an open system. It's not a closed shop. Okay, so if this happens, we actually get more powered and actually more real people come to politics. It'd be a great thing.
Completely agree.
And the first step there is to thank all you lot for coming down today. Like, if people don't turn up here, then there's no point doing this. So thanks you guys, and thanks one more time for the panel, please. Let's have a round of applause. Cool. Cheers, Karen. We might do this again on different subjects in the future, see what the vibe is. But for today, that's it, and thanks very much.
Thank you to John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Sorry, let's stand.
Do you know what I mean? Great question. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Just the... Really?
Yes.
She does.